Playlisters, there is a shakeup happening down in Georgia's 13th congressional district. And while it is a little bit of a tragic one, it has greatly shaped the race. And we today are talking with the guy who's trying to fill the seat. This is Political Playlist Happy Hour.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
You fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristof.
I'm Anna Muskie-Goldwyn.
And today, the politician on our playlist is Dr. Everton Blair.
Great
but
name.
Before we tell you, excellent name. Before we tell you about Dr. Blair, we want to set the stage here for what we were alluding to in our cold open, which is that Dr. Blair is running for the Democratic primary and congressional seat in Georgia's 13th district, which was currently until a week ago, or previously until a week ago, held by Congressman David Scott, who tragically, suddenly passed away last week. And he was 80 years old, a longtime Democrat, held this seat for 12 terms, and was facing a handful of primary challengers, including Dr. Blair. But his sudden passing has really reshaped this race. He was, in fact, running for re-election. So it's not as though he had decided to retire. He was actively running and suddenly passed away. So this has really thrown quite a wrench into this race. So Anna, can you tell us a little bit about Dr. Blair, who we're going to be speaking to in a moment here?
Yeah, the only thing I would add about the logistics of this, just, you know, the kind of like civics nerd of it all, is that
yes.
So there's the primary race happening now, and this is a pretty safe Democratic district. So whoever wins the primary is most likely going to be elected.
And we should say this is a suburb outside of Atlanta. Southeast Atlanta. Yep.
And but because Representative Scott passed away while currently serving in Congress, Governor Brian Kemp will have to hold a special election to fill the seat. So there will be another election for this seat sometime probably in the next couple months. And that person will only serve, until January, when whoever wins this race that Dr. Blair is in is sworn into Congress. So that it's one of these like weird things, I feel like, in specifically congressional politics, where because there's a long election of a primary and then a general, et cetera, that with a special election, it can kind of like, it puts someone in office for a mere few months at times.
And isn't it possible that the governor doesn't hold a special election? Haven't we seen that sort of done in the past, where they like delay it or
delayed it?
Okay.
Yeah, delayed it. And that might be the case because it's a Democratic district with a Republican governor. So maybe there's something going on there. Although I don't think Brian Kemp is someone who's incredibly partisan. So I don't know that it would be like a malicious delay, at least, you know, in my opinion. But anyway, it's just one of those weird machinations of politics. But to get to the point, we are interviewing
Dr. Blair.
Everton Blair, who is running for Congress, and he has a really interesting history. So he was born and raised in Georgia's 13th district, where he's running. He graduated from Harvard and then Stanford, and then he came back to Atlanta and Teach for America as a high school math teacher. After that, he worked in the Obama White House on education initiatives. So he has a growing background in education. And that went further, that when he was in his late 20s, he was elected to be the Board of Education for Gwinnett County in Georgia, which is the largest school district in the state. So he's in his late 20s running the largest school district in the state. And
by the way, I butchered that name. How do you know Gwinnett County? I was calling it Gwinnett.
Because it's like a famous part of Georgia.
Well, I don't know that.
I just
so
like
I butchered it on air.
I feel like for someone who watches a lot of cable news, I feel like it's always mentioned in like
Liz,
cable
I
news.
know Allegheny County and I know Broward County. Oh
my God. Okay,
Those
whatever.
are the two counties.
Let's get back to our guest.
Okay.
So So Everton Blair, he is one of the younger, if not the youngest candidates in this race. It's a crowded primary, but he does have these local ties that give him a real kind of distinction from some of the other people running. He would be the first gay person elected to Congress from Georgia, which is pretty interesting. He's a son of Jamaican immigrants, and he is really running on like an economic, community-focused message. This district is majority Black. It faces very, as he talks about kind of like the crises that we're all facing around the country tend to be felt much more acutely by Black Americans. And as I mentioned, it's a strongly Democratic district. So the primary kind of is the election. So early voting just started. The primary is the actual election day is in a couple weeks. So this is definitely an exciting and crazy time for our guest today.
Yeah. Well, he's a really fascinating guy to talk to. And I think what is notable that we discuss is he reminded us that he was really the youngest in all of these different things that he's done throughout his career. And we kind of joke how that was an asset in all of these other fields that he was doing. And now all of a sudden that's being used as an attack point on him, that he's not old enough. So, of course, we at Political Playlist strongly disagree with any sort of age stigma. So, without further ado, here is our interview with Dr. Everton Blair.
Dr. Everton Blair, thank you so much for joining us. We just hit record very quickly because we asked you how it was going, and your answer was
perfect.
This is wild. It is so crazy, but I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have the energy. I'm grateful to be in a position to be able to make a difference. But if you had told me that on the inside this is what running for Congress looked like, I probably wouldn't have even believed you. I mean, I don't know. They say it's a lot.
Well, because we're recording this on April 28th. Your early voting just started yesterday for you, right? So you're like really in the thick of it now.
That's right. Yeah, it's nonstop. All systems go. There's an interesting dynamic too, where we've been running this race for over a year now, but only as of like last weekend have folks started to pay attention.
Right.
Wow.
Everyone's starting to pay attention at the same time. So you're getting a lot of inquiry, a lot of intrigue, but then also just nonstop requests. There's forums every day. There's interviews and then obviously the news that we'll chat about, which has been the unfortunate sudden passing of the congressman last week.
Right.
Completely upended the dynamics in the race. So there's just a lot.
Never a dull day in running for Congress or Washington or the world right now for that matter. So
definitely. And my condolences still go to his family and to his staff. I mean, it's so hard to even fathom losing somebody that's been in public service for over 50 years. So there's a lot there that I hold near and dear to this moment. So
absolutely.
A ton of emotion.
We want to ask you about that, but if we could sort of first start by diving into your background in education, because I think this is a really amazing background that you have. You were a teacher. You worked in the Obama White House on education initiatives. You were the Gwinnett County School Board chairman. Am I pronouncing that right?
Gwinnett
County.
Gwinnett.
Come on, Michael. Okay. Even I knew that.
All right. Gwinnett. Excuse me. Which is the largest school system in the state. So how do we make sure that students get the education that they deserve? And can you talk about, from your perspective, what are those forces that you think are working against that right now?
Yeah. Great questions. And for me, I saw them in my lived experience in two different forms, one as a student and another as a teacher. And both were very resonant and still very active in how it's shaped my views of education policy today. But, as a student, my family we were some of the first people of color to move into what is now a very, very diverse part of Gwinnett.
Wow.
And so my whole childhood and education journey was shaped by, being an anomaly or seeming different or being the token of this or the special kid in some particular way. And, Shiloh Elementary, middle, and high school were majority white when I started, and then majority Black when I finished.
Wow.
That diversification and then the increase of students of color, and also the stigmas that were then placed on students of color, the depletion of resources, right? Like white teachers left, white families left, folks who moved into those homes came, and then many of them actually just needed more, but also the schools were labeling them as if they couldn't do more. And so all of that stuff at once, while I was, still active and doing the work in the community and honestly thriving, put a chip on my shoulder. And I always was like, we don't have to move across the street in order to get a good education. Like, it's this, I have the same brain that I would here as I would at Parkview or Brookwood.
Right.
Like, I can be successful from Shiloh. And so I always have been very, very aware of socioeconomic inequities because I kind of lived among them. And then graduating from Harvard and coming back home, so many of the folks that graduated from Harvard, like went to finance and consulting and
Right.
went to New York
Right.
or like, some fancy law school. And so I didn't want to do that. And I'd always loved school and wanted to do something school related. So I joined Teach for America and taught high school math and was 21 when.
Isn't that so crazy? I know people who did Teach for America. Where did you go?
In Atlanta, the city
Oh,
of
okay.
Atlanta.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah.
And it's wild to think too, because like, that was 13 years ago and I still feel like there's stuff I don't know.
You're like, what didn't I know then?
You put a 21-year-old in charge of like the final leg of the relay for seniors in their high school math completion. And I'm like, to this day, that's still my most difficult job and my most rewarding.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it was especially there where you're trying to get kids to the finish line, high school diploma, some of them into college, all of them into college at that time, realizing that for some of them it's not realistic. They either like don't have the resources to do it or just none of the drive to even want to be there. So why are we forcing something onto some students who would actually be better served, like creating wealth in their community at home with a job or trade of meaning? And so that's one of many like evolutions that I've personally undergone as a leader and as a thinker about just like where we need to go from here. But seeing this, so many barriers that my students who were just as smart as anybody that I went to Harvard or Stanford with just not be able to overcome was what compelled me to do something about the rules and the systems that don't really work.
Well, speaking of the systems that don't work, just anecdotally, Michael and I worked on a project recently where we were in Orlando, Florida, and interviewing some people. And one of the people we interviewed was a middle school civics teacher. And it was so eye-opening because he obviously loved his job. He was clearly very good at it. But he and his wife, who's also an educator, and these were his exact words, he said, one medical emergency away from financial ruin. And I think when you talk about systems, there's, of course, the systems that are leaving students behind, that are not allowing the intelligent students, like you said, the ability to move forward. But there's also a whole system revolving around teachers where, this guy deserves more than what he has for the amount of work and passion he's putting into his job. So can you talk a little bit about, like, if you're elected to Congress and you have the opportunity to really begin hopefully shaping these kinds of things with your expertise at the federal level, what can we do for teachers to get more teachers, to keep the ones that we have, to pay them better? Like, how does that realistically look?
Yeah, I mean, you just got to do it. Like when I got to the school board, this is one of the things I ran on is like the teaching profession is very difficult and it is so important, and it won't get better for our kids unless it's better for our teachers. And, linking those two things together, like an investment in the resources, 90% of what we spend on in public education is actually salaries and benefits. So when you're talking about like more resources for kids, it's like people. They need more touch points. They need more interactions. They need more positive experiences, which means, that's staff members that have to be there. And making like a very complex, esoteric budget exercise, like breaking it down. So it's like, no, they just need another guidance counselor that they can run into in the hallway. So that if something's wrong, they know who to go to talk to. Or like, we just need some more social workers because, our schools are ballooning. And with all of that overcrowding, like we need to break up the ratios so that people can get more case management and more care. And so not really rocket science. It is hard
Yeah.
to do because the money has to come from somewhere, but we seem to have money for a lot of other things. So
Right.
let's
Right.
eat and educate.
Yeah. Well, speaking of money, I want to ask you about affordability. And
Mhm.
I want to preface this by saying that we've been asking this question a lot, and we've been prefacing it a lot by saying we hate this term affordability crisis.
No, I do too.
It's so
That's what everyone says.
Right. It's like it's so bland and like all encompassing.
Vast.
Like, what does it mean, really?
Mhm.
So
Why aren't we just saying money?
right, exactly. It's
We
like
need more money.
shit is too expensive. Yes.
People need money.
Yeah.
People need
So-
more money.
Can you talk a little bit about what that practically on the ground looks like in Georgia's 13th district?
Yeah. I mean, so I want to do the aggregate exercise, which is like the thing that we're not saying is billionaires and the big corporations are just taking all the money, right?
Yeah.
We're in the richest country in the history of the world. We actually have a higher GDP than we've ever had. And if you look at the wealth disparities and the wealth inequality, it's just because the top 1% is taking all the money and leaving us with starvation wages and barely enough to get by. So the real issue is like our jobs aren't as good as they used to be. This is actually what I think has been weaponized along with the white anxiety of Make America Great Again to have us kind of like think that we need to revert back to old school things and norms of the 50s, 60s, whatever era he's trying to invoke with people when he says that
Right.
is really that like we are actually paying more for less.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the innovation and the technological advances of society, it does feel like you can't just work one job at a factory for 30 years and feed a family of 4.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's true, right? Like the home buying age is skyrocketing to in the 40s in most states in this country. That's a problem, right? We know that that's a greatest way for people to access the middle class and stay stable when even times get tough. You can pull out some equity in your house and stay afloat. So there's so many different barriers from housing to education to healthcare that like when people say affordability, they really just mean the quality of life is bad. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not as good as it should be in the richest country on earth because all the wealth is being stolen and taken to the very, very elite few.
And what is that for people in your district? Like when you're having these conversations on the campaign trail, what in Georgia and your specific part of Georgia, what are the issues that maybe people keep coming up against that time and time again they can't seem to clear the hurdle on?
Yeah, it's delaying medical care often is one of the things that I hear
Wow.
because Georgia's uniquely a very populous state in a very concentrated area around Metro Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of residents in this district are reliant on services and care that is concentrated in Atlanta, but there's no Atlanta addresses in this congressional district. It's like all Black and brown suburbs, south and east of the city. And so with that, like our access to hospitals, right? Our access to sophisticated specialty care, you're not going to really find as many of those clinics in Stockbridge and in Jonesboro and in Snellville. You're going to have to go to the more affluent parts of the city to get that type of care. And then with rising costs, it often means that you're waiting, right? Or you're having to choose between paying that bill or doing, your normal things that come up. And oftentimes those are even more exacerbated when you have kids that also need care or elder parents that you're also caring for. And like there's that sandwich generation that a lot of folks in the 13th are experiencing, because if you look on its face, it's like sprawling suburbs. Like a lot of people have lawns and yards and, homes with multiple bedrooms. But when you peel down underneath, it's like you got 3 generations of people living in there. Right. Or you've got a lot of issues and bills that are coming out at once. And so many families are like one paycheck away, right? One paycheck away from eviction or like one layoff away from really being in a dire situation. And with a shrinking economy and a receding economy, we are always hearing like somebody lost their job and had to move in with this person, right? Or this younger generation like can't afford to even think about buying a home because the rent is more expensive than the mortgages are. So there's a lot of folks that are like living intergenerationally with one another and then just struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah. Well, on the continuing topic of money a little bit, you've proposed a $20 federal minimum wage, correct? Index for inflation. So
By the
I
time
feel
we
like
pass it will need to be higher.
so my question is, I feel like this has been a topic of discussion for a very long time. There's obviously, if Democrats win the House, the Senate, the White House in 2028, maybe there's a possibility of pushing this forward. However, I think even in the best scenario, there's a fight to be had for maybe some more centrist Democrats who might not feel like they want to pull the trigger on it. Maybe you're going to have to talk to some moderate Republicans about this. What, in your mind, as an elected member of Congress, how does that fight for a higher federal minimum wage, which I do feel like has been this proposition for so long? How do you get that to the finish line, even in the most ideal but tough circumstances?
Yeah, I think we need to use storytelling and media in order to advance our message more effectively. Oftentimes people feel like, on the campaign trail, they'll be like, who's speaking up for us anymore? Why don't we feel like anybody's fighting for us? And some of that is just because they're not seeing it, and they don't have an entry point to then get mobilized or get organized to do something else. And so the grassroots organizing and the efforts that we do often just around presidential elections, like we need to do every month. And we have capacity to do so, right? We have the millions of dollars do get put into these campaigns, but they can't be for consultants. They have to be for people organizing. And so I think that's a big part of what we can do, is just gin up some of the stories and the actual frustration and the data to then make the case to anybody, right? Republicans, Democrats, whomever. And then on the other end, we need to recruit new leaders who are going to just do it and go there. And I think that requires, somebody who's willing to not just hold power for themselves, but also spread power and build power. And, one of the things that it's really hard to see, but it's one of the greatest assets I have in this campaign is like, I'm really, really big on my relationships. And if you know me and you've seen me in the community, like, I'm here to help. I will come to your events. I will help introduce you to people. I will give you money, right? You resources. I share. And so a large part of what I believe can be done in this congressional district and then in Congress nationally is just having more builders. We talk often about fighters, but like, what happens when we have the majority and then all we know how to do is fight?
You're not the first person. That's the first person we've interviewed in this series of candidates who has used that term, builders, instead of just fighters. Because I think that's like, it's so interesting. This is an anecdote, but it's really interesting talking to young people who are running right now. There are these through lines that we've been discovering you're from all different parts of the country. And that is one that we've heard now a couple times, is this idea of like, okay, if we can get to the point where we have the opportunity to change things, like what are we building? I think that it's so interesting to hear all you
Were
guys
the
say
other
that.
people local electeds?
No, they were we've been interviewing people in your exact position that are running in competitive. They're mostly Democrats because there's so many Democratic challengers right now running in Democratic primaries. And that word has been, I think it was from Indiana. Yeah.
Yeah. Indiana, Maryland, Florida, Georgia.
When things are broken and he keeps breaking and Trump keeps breaking more things, it's like, this is going to take a while to build. And it's not going to be enough just to be, anti-Trump or anti-MAGA.
Right.
Like, we also have to have a vision and some backbone for how to get in there and put things together that actually work for people and give them the receipts, right? The people are still talking about these Trump checks from 6 years ago.
Right.
If we can't put some wins on the board and then actually brag about them, like, that's on us.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
It's funny. Something that concerns me is the idea of, there's a lot that's broken right now, and it is going to take time. And I'm worried people they don't have the patience or the recognition of, hey, what does this really look like to actually rebuild some of these things? I'm a little concerned about that.
I see that as just a bigger issue, right? Like the impatience of politics and people feeling like if they don't see something materially change, then the other side is automatically better, right? Like, I think we've had essentially like 3 different change elections since 2008. And they've just been like Obama or Trump.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
And so we have to, that is concerning. And I do think we need to understand that and then be able to articulate wins in a way that is granular and easy to digest for, hardworking people who only pay attention for like 5 minutes to politics a month.
Right.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, I do think that there are some things you can do in community with constituent services, mutual aid, and just organizing that will bring resources together and have people really see the connection between the federal government and your local issues, projects, and goals. And I hear often about things that like, oh, Congress can't do anything about that. And I'm like, Congress has the biggest purse in the world. They could do something about maybe everything we're talking about. Just something. Let's
Right.
not limit ourselves. Let's brainstorm. And maybe it is just like a $1 million block grant for the building of a senior home, right? But then that's services that can be provided to new family members in a community, and transportation so that people can actually get to bingo night, or whatever it is.
Right.
So
Gotta get to bingo night. I love it.
Yeah, being creative about whatever it is where I land.
Let me ask you about your district. You had mentioned earlier that it is mostly Black voters, majority in your district. So I'm curious, what are the issues that you see Black Americans facing right now that are maybe being overlooked or not talked about enough?
Yeah, well, Black Americans have always suffered the inequities the hardest when we're in an economic downturn. And so I think one thing that we need to be acutely aware of is like we talk often about, oh, the economy's fine because the unemployment rate's low and the stock market is booming. And it's like, when you dissect the degree to which that helps Black Americans, there's still a reality that like wealth disparities are so vastly different, and the outcomes, the health outcomes especially. And I didn't mention earlier, but Georgia is also a state that has an expanded Medicaid. And because the ACA subsidies have expired, there are many hardworking Black families that are either in gig economy jobs, right? Or they're like working in construction projects that once that project ends, they lose healthcare because it's still tied to employers. And so when I talk about Medicare for all, it's so that there's no coverage gap, irrespective of your current job condition. And that our seniors, right, who are reliant on Medicare, have an expanded version of care that actually covers all of their needs, including mental and aging, with dignity. And so I just see this as like, we need a Black economic agenda. And this is why we wrote one, right? Because I care about this district, and I'm not afraid to say Black, environment and in a discourse where people are like trying to tiptoe around it. And like, with a very clearly racist regime that is making DEI illegal to say, like, we have to be brave enough to just articulate, like, you constitutionally drew this district because you complied with the Voting Rights Act. It is a majority Black district because of that. And then you also gerrymandered all of these different communities that frankly have different, regional and geographic needs, but share the similarities of just being left out of the equation. We don't live in Atlanta, but we have so many more of us that are moving further and further out because that is where the cheaper rents and the cheaper home prices are. But because of that, we now have folks that are much further disconnected to services and have historically not had the benefit of intergenerational wealth to rely on. So those two things together mean that like you need somebody who's socioeconomically aware enough of that issue and then also going to talk about it. And so I talked about, the airport as an engine historically that Maynard Jackson created and ensured had federal contracting that went to minority and women-owned businesses. That created Black wealth for a whole cadre of folks that were left out of New Deal era politics and the GI Bill. But then we're able to have federal contracting as a boon for their societies. Now we don't live in Atlanta, and we live a lot of times further and further away from the airport. So what does the version of minority business contracting look like in a majority Black suburb where everybody's spread out and folks are miles and miles away? And I think with that, you just need like nodes throughout those communities that have the infrastructure projects and the small business entrepreneurship support and the administrative help to get those resources to people.
I mean, to just talk about your district a little bit more, we obviously touched on the very sad passing of your former representative, David Scott. And, it's never a dull day in politics. It's like pretty wild. Passes away. He was still running for re-election. You obviously were running against him amongst a crowded field of Democrats. And what I'm wondering is first how that event has kind of reshaped the race a little bit. And also, as a person of a very different generation who's running, how you honor the legacy of someone who served for a very long time, but also push yourself to stand out in this competitive primary as someone different and new and perhaps quite contrary to maybe how he was governing and who he was within the district.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I lament the entire circumstance overall, right? Because it's not ideal, and it was never personal.
Right.
My jumping into this race, my desire to run and represent my community, but it is. I mean, it is like the timing of it is just so tough because we haven't even gotten the chance to mourn. Early voting started yesterday.
Right.
Wow.
So there's just like, and it happened the day before my birthday. We had all of these birthday plans that we were going to do, and I just didn't have the bandwidth to do it all. So we scaled some things down, and truly, I don't even think today, right now, honestly, I haven't even had like the space to
a
really
moment. Yeah.
because it's just so nonstop. But I do think that the biggest way that I can think to honor a man's legacy who has served our community for over 50 years is to continue to do a really good job and just to use effort and all of the willpower and the skill that I have to just do a great job and move us forward.
What about
that's awesome
comparatively now to the other people that you're running against, right? Like, not to be crass about it, but now there's a whole new race to be looked at. And how has that shifted, for whatever extent you've been able to process it, your mentality about being in this competitive primary that looks very different now?
Yeah, I mean, we have no heuristic or precedent to really go by because, I've never run for Congress before. I've definitely never run in a race that became an open race. And I don't think that there's very many people in the country who have also been in these shoes that all of the 5 other challengers and myself now find ourselves in. But the reality now is even before his tragic passing, there were special interest money that were being spent to prop up one candidate in this race. And so now it is a race of special interests versus a free and fair election where people have the opportunity to choose a candidate to represent them and to lead us forward. And so, I mean, I'm just proud that my campaign has been focused on the community, and it's because I'm from it and I'm raised in it, and still have, and all of my family lives in it and are voters. But there's just a deeper familial relational connection that is grounding me. And when I talk about the issues, nothing has changed in terms of the issues. And I just think the only dynamics politically that have shifted are obviously pathway to victory, vote count, stuff like that, where there's some mechanics involved there that we have to think differently about. But the work is the work. And I'm just talking about working families' issues in a predominantly Black district.
I love that. I listening to you talk, I mean, obviously you are making a ton of sense, and I'm like, I want to vote in your district. I wish I could. And I'm curious, as you talk to people and you're getting your message out there, how do you think being a young candidate has given you an edge in the race? Do you find that your community is very receptive to that? Obviously, you have such a large age gap to the previous representative. So what challenges or benefits have you seen with that?
It's interesting. I don't feel like I'm that young anymore, but people still say it.
Neither do we, but we keep telling
same.
ourselves we are.
I know. Clinging.
So, I would have felt that way at 21, right? When I was teaching in a school, or when I was first elected to the school board at 26. I chaired our school system also at 28.
Which is wild. That is so cool. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I've also been the youngest at every job I've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah, I skipped a grade and then ended high school.
Okay.
All right.
I've always been young, right? And I've always, I've never, only until recently in politics have I felt this like reality that people expected less of me. You know, before I got into this foray, it was like, oh, we want to pick you because you're the bright shining star. This one was like, oh, you have not had enough experience yet.
Huh.
And so then now I turn around, I'm like, well, actually, I've been elected by more people than anybody else now
Yeah.
in this race.
Yeah.
And have
Oh,
led,
wow.
you know, I can show you receipts of things that I actually did versus you know, so the only other electeds that are in this district are legislators who, not for, you know, not for reasons that aren't without the Republicans interfering and not really letting them do much, but like my resume stacked up against theirs is just a little bit stronger in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
how I led.
Also, interestingly, like having executive experience running a school board feels like I think it's something that we keep hearing is like, we need to have leaders who do have executive experience and understand how to manage people. Because even though Congress itself is a legislative body, not necessarily an executive body, if you think about it, it is all about how are you going to manage your team, your staff, your relationships, and having that managerial experience feels like something that people are craving.
And you're still kind of the executive of the district.
Right.
You know, like when you go back home, your district office is yours. And so even in the legislative capacity, like I think the school board also positions you so well to do all three duties of Congress because it is inherently legislative in that we pass law and we, you know, levy property taxes and pass a budget. Executive in the sense that I hired our first Black superintendent. Like that vote I was the swing vote, and it would not have happened without me being the person who was both the chair and the leader of the process. And then I managed both our superintendents, the previous who, you know, had been the superintendent since I was in kindergarten. 25 years later, I'm his boss.
Wow.
And then transitioning to our next leader. And then you know, there's so much executive work that happens there that I think that's going to be where people feel and see the difference in our community, because I will lead in the district capacity to really make sure that everything is connected and that people have what they need.
Yeah.
Then there's the judicial part, which kind of has like the oversight piece. And then also like, you know, I oversaw all of the appeals and student disciplinary.
You got it all covered.
Oh, wow.
Still, I will say that we are all still young. You are we're very young for politician standards.
Yeah.
Right. Part of the problem, because I mean, to further build on your point, it's like millennial and Gen Z members of our society are underrepresented in Congress.
Yep.
And because of that, many of our issues are underrepresented. So we get vilified for not showing up to vote, but then don't feel like there are candidates to vote for that represent and reflect our issues. Let's change that by electing somebody who's not going to leave anybody behind, but also gets living paycheck to paycheck, having student loan debt, you know, struggling to make ends meet, and then having the realities that it's just harder to live than it was for our parents economically.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, that's our clip, by the way.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna
I was literally just thinking
pin
that.
We're gonna pin that on our Instagram. That's perfect.
Well, you've been incredibly generous with your time, and we know you're in the heat of it. So we're going to wrap up. But before we let you go, we just have a quick lightning round that we've been asking all of the candidates we're interviewing. So first thing that comes to your head, no pressure. Give us a hidden gem in your district that people don't know about. It can be a place, a restaurant, a nature, anything.
I'm going to say the Yellow River Park.
Okay. Got it.
Cool.
And then let's say that you win this upcoming primary, assuming that your nearest and dearest are with you by your side. Who is going to be your first phone call?
Not first phone call is not my nearest and dearest who are by my side.
Well, if they're right next to you, you know, we're assuming that like, you know, that they're there.
It's my mom. If my mom's not beside me, it's going to be my mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love that. Okay. And then what about a podcast or book that's shaping your thinking at the moment?
Oh, I haven't actually gotten through 107 days, and that's on the list. But
okay.
Stacey Abrams' podcasts I listen to weekly, and she's always been the like biggest mentor, thinker, thought leader in my view of what's going on in Georgia, and then how to also translate the complex and break it down into something that's really understandable.
Okay, your favorite pump up song for workout, a speech, appearance, whatever.
Oh God, lose my breath, Destiny's Child.
Oh, okay. I
All
love
right.
it. All right. So term limits, are you in favor of them?
Absolutely. And I self-imposed one on this race.
Great. Okay. And then, as we mentioned, you're a very busy man these days. What does the rest of your day look like today?
Let's see. I have a candidate interview, that I'm late for right now. Some work to do for my full-time job, which I am struggling to fulfill, but doing with grace and leniency from my team. And then a candidate forum at 6:30 and some canvassing for the hour in between.
Amazing.
And if we get out of there early, I might canvass until sundown, but I think I'm going to end up staying and chatting with folks. And then I'll meet with my team at 9:30 p.m., 10 p.m. to plan for tomorrow.
Wow.
You got to run on adrenaline these days. We will let you get to that meeting. Dr. Everton Blair, thank you so much for your time and good luck with your primary that is in motion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to chat.
Talk
That
soon.
was great. Thank you, Dr. Blair.